He didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't move a single muscle when 14 Navy SEALs formed a circle around him and started pushing. And when the biggest operator on the compound stepped across that invisible line and crouched down to look the dog in the eye, Maya Voss said 6 words without raising her voice. "I warned you. He's a master." 5 seconds later, Senior Chief Decker was flat on the concrete, and every man in that circle had gone completely, absolutely silent. Before we go any further, hit subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Stay until the very end, because what this dog proved on that compound will change the way you think about loyalty, discipline, and what it really means to be the best in the room. The evaluation at Naval Special Warfare Command's Advanced Training Compound in Coronado had been running since 0600, and by the time the last live fire team wrapped and the platoon came off the South Range, everyone was loose and satisfied, the way operators got at the end of a clean day. 14 men, gear still warm, moving in the easy collective rhythm of a unit that had spent enough time together to share a single set of instincts. They had just rotated back from 6 months in Djibouti. They had earned the easy walk. That was when Senior Chief Decker saw her. He stopped mid-sentence in a conversation about the afternoon debrief schedule and tilted his head slightly, the way a man does when something does not fit the pattern he has been trained to read. A woman stood on the concrete strip at the far end of the range, alone. Long dark brown hair loose over her shoulders, an olive green fitted V-neck top, and military camouflage cargo pants. No rank visible, no unit patch, no insignia of any kind. She looked young, early 20s at most, and she was standing with her arms at her sides and her weight balanced and her eyes forward in a posture that was not nervous and not performing and not doing anything at all except being exactly where she was. Beside her sat a German shepherd, tan gold and black coat, amber eyes, large, well-muscled, with a wide chest and square head of working-line stock rather than anything bred for appearance. The dog was not moving, not an ear flick, not a tail sweep, not a single adjustment of weight or posture. He sat with the specific completeness of an animal that had made a decision about stillness and intended to honor it indefinitely. "Who is that?" Decker asked. Lieutenant Ortega, beside him, glanced over. "Not in our brief." "She's holding a range position." "Range officer said temporary observer, not attached to our eval." Decker looked at her for another 3 seconds. Then he looked at the dog. The dog was looking back at him, not in the reflexive way dogs tracked movement, in the considered way that made the back of Decker's neck do something it had not done in a long time. "That dog hasn't moved since we came off the range," Decker said. "Neither has she," Ortega replied. They walked toward her, not as a unit, just 2 men drifting in the direction of something that did not fit, which was exactly how real professionals approached everything that did not fit. 3 more operators followed without being asked, then 4 more. By the time Decker was close enough to read the absence of any identifying marker on her plate carrier, there were 8 of them, and the woman had still not adjusted a single thing about her posture or her expression. "Handler," Decker said. She looked at him. Her eyes were calm in the specific way that had nothing to do with being relaxed, the way that came from having decided something long before the present moment arrived.
"Senior Chief," she replied, "you're not in our brief."
"No."
"Range officer says you're a floater observer."
"That's correct." Decker looked at the dog. The dog was looking at him. "What's his name?"
"Atlas,"
she said. One of the operators behind Decker, a wiry man named Briggs, with a habit of testing edges, made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Atlas. Big name for a dog doing a whole lot of nothing." She did not look at Briggs. She did not respond to Briggs. She held Decker's gaze with the patience of someone who had already played this conversation out in her head and was simply waiting for the other party to arrive at the part that mattered. "How old are you?" Decker asked. 22. The operators exchanged a look. Not a mean one. Just the look men give each other when a piece of information does not compute against the context surrounding it. "You're on a special warfare compound, standing at a range position, with a dog that looks like it's been carved out of concrete," Decker said. 22 years old, no rank visible, no unit, no handler credentials on your carrier. He paused. "What exactly are you doing here?" "Observation," she said, "not evaluation." "Observation of what?" "You," she said, simply, without any attempt to soften it. The circle that had formed around her was not threatening. These were professional men who understood the difference between enclosure and aggression. But they were close, and they were many, and the dog still had not moved. Briggs crouched down about 4 feet from Atlas and held out a hand. "Come on, buddy. Let's see what you've got." Atlas did not look at the hand. His amber eyes moved to Briggs's feet, then to his hips, then back to Decker. "He's not a hand watcher," Maya said. Briggs pulled his hand back slowly. "What does he watch?" "Pressure, breath, weight transfer." She paused. "The things people do before they do what they're about to do." A couple of operators laughed, not unkindly, but with the comfortable condescension of men who had spent years operating at the highest level of their profession and had a reasonable basis for confidence. "Handler," said a larger operator named Crane, coming around from the left. "You're on a Sile training compound with some of the most experienced canine units in the world. Detection dogs, patrol assets, dual-purpose animals. We've seen a lot of good dogs do a lot of impressive things. No offense to your partner, but a dog sitting still isn't a demonstration." "I know," Maya said. "He's not demonstrating anything." "Then what is he doing?" She looked at Atlas. Something passed between them that was not a command and was not a cue. Just attention, held and returned. "He's deciding," she said. Crane tilted his head. "Deciding what?" "Whether any of you are worth the energy." The laughter that followed that was genuine and unguarded, the kind that broke the tension of a moment cleanly, and for about 45 seconds the compound had the easy atmosphere of a group of professionals having a good-natured exchange about a young woman and her unusually composed dog. Then Decker stepped forward. He did it without calculating it, not aggressively, not provocatively, just the natural movement of a man who was the most experienced person in any room he entered, and whose body had internalized the assumption of controlled space. He stepped inside the invisible radius that the dog's stillness had been defining without anyone acknowledging it out loud. Atlas's breathing changed. Not faster, deeper. His chest expanded fully for the first time since Decker had been watching him. The muscles along his shoulders set in the way that was not a coil and was not a flinch, but was the body's recognition that a decision was approaching. Maya's fingers adjusted on the leash. She did not pull it. She did not tighten it. She just let her grip become ready, in the way that hands become ready before something they have prepared for a long time finally arrives. "Handler," Decker said, eyes on the dog. "Your boy getting nervous?" "He's not nervous," Maya said. "He's patient." "There's a difference?" "Yes. Nervous animals react to fear. Patient animals wait for confirmation." She looked at Decker directly. "Senior Chief, please take one step back." Decker did not take a step back. Not out of defiance. Out of the same professional self-assurance that had kept him effective in places where self-assurance was the margin between operational success and catastrophic failure. He was not afraid of a dog. He had worked beside some of the best military working animals in 4 combat theaters. He understood their capabilities and their limits. "He's fine," Decker said. "I've been around working dogs my whole career."
"I know," Maya said. "That's why I'm telling you instead of letting him."
Briggs grinned. "Is that a threat?" Maya looked at him with an expression that did not change. "It's information. You can do what you want with it." The circle had tightened without anyone deciding to tighten it. There were 11 operators within 15 feet now, moving with the loose, unconscious drift of people who were curious and comfortable and had no particular reason to believe the situation required them to be anything else. Decker crouched down. He brought himself to Atlas's eye level. It was the move he had made 100 times with working dogs. The gesture that said, "I am not a threat. I am a professional who respects what you are. Let's establish that clearly and move forward." Atlas looked at him. Not at his hands. Not at his face in the way dogs looked at faces when they were reading emotional cues. At his hips, at the specific angle of his knees, and the precise distribution of his weight across both feet, and the exact degree of forward lean that his posture carried. "I warned you," Maya said. Her voice was quiet and flat and entirely without drama. "He's a master." Decker leaned forward 1 more inch. The next 2 seconds did not look like what Decker expected. Atlas did not lunge, did not bark, did not make any of the sounds or gestures that trained observers used to anticipate a working dog's engagement. He moved sideways with a lateral precision that had no wasted motion in it, cutting across Decker's center line from the right, his compact body weight meeting the lead leg with an angle and a timing that Decker's body recognized before his mind had the language for it. One moment Decker was crouching. The next, his shoulder hit the concrete. Atlas stood above him with 4 legs distributing weight across his chest in a pattern that tracked every breath, every twitch, every micro-adjustment of the man beneath him with the unhurried accuracy of a system that had been running a long time and did not need to rush. There was no bite. There was no growl. There was only the low vibration that entered Decker's ribcage from the dog's chest. Not a sound exactly, more like a frequency that communicated its meaning without requiring translation. The compound went silent. Not the silence of shock, the silence of 14 experienced operators simultaneously recalibrating against information that did not fit the model they had arrived with. Maya's voice came through the stillness without urgency. "Atlas." The dog did not look at her. 1 beat. 2. "Release." Atlas stepped back from Decker's chest with the same economy of motion he had used going in. No drama in the departure. No performance. He returned to his position beside Maya and sat, and his breathing settled back to the pace it had been at before any of this happened. Decker lay on the concrete for 2 full seconds. Then he got up slowly, rolling his shoulder once, and stood and looked at the dog and said nothing. Nobody said anything. Maya reached down and offered Decker her hand. He looked at it. Then he took it. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. He said it the way a man said something when the honest version was more complicated than the word he chose. "Yeah." She nodded once. She turned back to her position. Atlas sat beside her. The amber eyes moved across the compound with the patience of an animal that had made its point without needing to repeat it. Briggs was the first one to find his voice. It came out quieter than his earlier register. "What," he said slowly, "is that dog?" Maya looked at him, and for the first time since the platoon had come off the range, something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile. The specific calm of a person arriving at the part of the conversation they came for. "That," she said, is a question worth asking." Nobody moved for a long moment after Maya said that. Decker was still rolling his shoulder, not because it was seriously hurt, but because his body needed somewhere to put the energy of what had just happened, and rolling his shoulder was the most dignified option available. He had been on the concrete for 2 seconds. 2 seconds was not a long time in any context, except the specific context of being put there by something you had categorically underestimated. He looked at Atlas. Atlas looked back at him, with those amber eyes that held the same temperature they had held before, during, and after the entire event. Not triumphant. Not watchful in the guarded way animals watched people who had become threats. Just present. Completely, unhurriedly present. "Start talking," Decker said to Maya. It was not a request. It was not a command either. It was the voice of a man who had recalibrated and was now operating from a different position than the one he had arrived with. And everyone within earshot recognized the difference. Maya did not make him wait. "He doesn't track hands," she said. "Most working dogs are hand-trained from early development. Handlers use hand signals, targets move hands, threat simulations focus on hand behavior. So most canine assets, even good ones, spend their operational lives watching the wrong thing." She paused. Atlas watches hips, foot pressure, the shift in a person's center of gravity that happens in the half-second before their body commits to a movement. He watches breath rate, muscular readiness in the shoulders and upper back. Another pause. And he smells cortisol, adrenaline, the specific chemical profile of a nervous system moving from passive to active. Briggs stared at her. "Dogs can smell stress. That's not new." "Correct," she said. "What's new is that Atlas was trained to quantify it, not just detect the presence of stress, but weigh it against movement pattern. If the chemical signal crosses a threshold and the body mechanics confirm it, he doesn't wait for a verbal cue." She looked at Decker. "He responds." Decker said nothing for a moment. Then, "Handler independence window." Maya looked at him with a slight recalibration of someone who had not expected that term from this conversation. "You know the protocol," she said. "I know the program it comes from," Decker said carefully. "The question is, what that program is doing standing on my compound with no credentials and no brief." The operators around them had shifted in their positions without realizing it. Earlier, they had been a loose circle of curious professionals. Now they were closer, quieter, leaning in with the specific attention of people who understood that the conversation had moved into territory that mattered. Crane spoke from the left. "What program?" Maya looked at him, then back at Decker, making the assessment of how much to give and in what order. "There was a classified pilot unit," she said. "Stood up 4 years ago at a forward operating base in Djibouti. The concept was close-quarters combat dogs embedded with Tier 1 operators, not attached as support assets, integrated, parallel assault entry. The dogs trained alongside the human CQB teams, not as backup, but as simultaneous operators with independent decision authority inside a defined engagement window." The compound was very quiet. "Atlas was part of that unit," she continued. "He's not patrol-trained. He's not detection-trained. He was trained to enter a structure beside a human team, read the threat environment without verbal command, and respond within a 3-second independent window if his handler was compromised or communication was lost." Crane said, "That program was real?" "It was real," Maya said. "It ran for 2 years. It produced 4 animals that completed the full integration protocol. Atlas was one of them." "What happened to the other 3?" Briggs asked. Maya did not answer immediately. She looked at Atlas. He was watching the compound perimeter with a patient scan of a dog who was always working, even when nothing was happening. "2 were retired after their handlers rotated out of the program," she said. "1 was euthanized after an incident in Bahrain, that was documented incorrectly in the official record. She stopped. Atlas was the last one active, Decker said. And his original handler? The quality of the silence that followed that question was different from the silences before it. It had weight in it. His original handler was a dev group operator, Maya said. Her voice stayed even, but something in it changed, in the way voices changed, when the information being delivered had been carried for a long time and had not gotten lighter. His call sign was Shepherd. 4 years in the program with Atlas, 4 combat deployments, counterinsurgency operations across 3 theaters. She paused. 2 years ago, Shepherd's unit hit a compound in northern Mali. Bad intel, trapped entry. 2 operators went down in the first 15 seconds. Atlas was already inside the structure when Shepherd took a round, clearing the left breach. Nobody asked what kind of round. Nobody needed to. Fatal, Decker said quietly. Immediate, Maya said. She looked at the ground for exactly 1 second. Then she looked back up.
Atlas kept going, she said. He took the corner. He intercepted a hostile who was flanking the secondary team from a back corridor. He took him down without a sound and without a command, because there was no one left to give him one. He held the position until the secondary team breached and cleared. Security camera from the compound's own equipment caught the entire sequence. She paused. That footage is the reason they didn't put him down after. Standard protocol for an independent canine engagement is evaluation for behavioral compromise. But the footage showed zero escalation beyond what the situation required. He did exactly what the situation needed, and nothing more. Decker was quiet for a long time. His jaw was working slightly, the way a man's jaw worked when he was processing something, and his body was running ahead of his mind. So they reassigned him, he said. They tried twice, Maya said. The first reassignment lasted 6 weeks. The handler requested a transfer, said Atlas was too independent, too sensory-driven, said he wouldn't respond correctly under pressure. Something moved across her face. Not quite contempt. Something more tired than contempt. What he meant was, Atlas wouldn't pretend to need commands he didn't need. He wouldn't perform dependence for a handler who needed to feel in control. And the second? Ortega asked. 3 months. Handler said Atlas was broken, that whatever had happened in Mali had compromised his willingness to follow direction. She looked at Atlas. He wasn't broken. He just couldn't make himself small enough for someone who was afraid of him. Crane said quietly, and then they called you. I was the last qualified handler on the program list. Cross-signal tracking certification, close quarters management, advanced handler independence protocol. Everyone else had rotated out or requested off the list. She paused. I've been working with Atlas for 18 months. I'm not his first. I just carry the leash now. There was no ego in the way she said it. No performance of humility either. Just the plain statement of a woman who understood exactly what she was in relation to this animal and had made peace with the specific shape of that. Decker looked at Atlas for a long time. Atlas was not looking at him. He was looking at the range perimeter with the quality of attention that had a name in serious working dog circles. Not alerting, not scanning, just being present in the way that meant everything was being processed and nothing was being missed. What else can he do? Decker asked. Maya looked at him. That is a better question than you know, Senior Chief. Then answer it. He's never missed a track. Never misread intent in a confirmed engagement scenario. He can move through an unfamiliar structure in reduced light without sound. He can identify booby trap profiles by scent composition before physical contact. He can distinguish between a threat posture and a stress posture in a civilian population in under 4 seconds. She paused. And he has perfect recall of every handler he has ever worked with.
Every voice, every command style, every pattern of movement and breath. "How many handlers?" Briggs asked. Maya was quiet for 1 second. 8, she said. Through the original training cycle and subsequent reassignments, 8 handlers total. Nobody did the math out loud. Nobody needed to, because the number sat in the air above the compound with a weight that every man present felt in his own chest in his own way. Through the specific memory of missions that almost did not come back from. Through the faces of people who had not rotated home. Through the private accounting that every operator kept and never discussed. 8 handlers. 18 months of deployments per rotation. 4 combat theaters. And Atlas, sitting at Maya's side at a training compound in Coronado, with amber eyes that carried every single one of those partnerships somewhere inside them. Decker exhaled slowly. "He remembers all of them," he said. It was not a question. "Every one," Maya said. "That's why he doesn't wait anymore." Nobody spoke. She let the silence do what silence did when the right information had been given to the right people in the right order. Then she looked at Decker directly. "You asked what he is," she said. "He's not a patrol dog. He's not a detection asset. He's not a support tool." She paused. "He's the final decision point. The moment after every other option has been removed. The thing that acts when everything else has already gone wrong." Decker looked at her. Then he looked at Atlas. Then he said something that nobody in the platoon expected him to say. "Kill House 4, he said. "Blank loadout, reduced lighting. Let's see how he moves." Maya did not smile, but something settled in her posture. The specific settling of a person who has been waiting for exactly that sentence. "He doesn't learn a layout," she said. "Just so you know." Decker raised an eyebrow. "Then what does he do?" "He reads the room," she said. "Every time. Like it's the first time. Because for him, it always is." Killhouse 4B had a reputation on the compound. Not because of its layout, which was standard. 1 corridor, 3 breachable rooms, 6 offset door frames designed to break line of sight at every turn. Its reputation came from what it did to confidence. Operators who walked in certain, walked out quieter. The reduced lighting and offset geometry had a way of exposing the gap between what a man thought he knew about spatial awareness and what he actually knew. And that gap had a way of being larger than expected. Decker had run it clean twice in his career. He considered that a reasonable record. He stood at the observation window with 9 of his operators and watched Maya unclip the leash from Atlas's harness and say one word. "Work." Atlas did not run. He moved forward with a low, fluid drift that looked unhurried until you tried to track it precisely and realized your eyes were always catching up rather than anticipating. His tail was down. His head was level. Every muscle in his body was operating at the minimum output required to move through space without announcing itself. Briggs was watching the overhead camera feed on the monitor beside the window. "He's not even looking at the first door frame," he said. "He doesn't need to look at it," Maya said from the entry position, her eyes on the feed. "He already knows it's there." "How?" "Air pressure differential. The gap in the frame changes the way air moves through the corridor. He mapped it in the first 4 steps." Briggs opened his mouth and closed it again. On the feed, Atlas reached the first door frame and passed through it without touching either side. Clean centerline, no adjustment, as if the frame had been built to his exact width and he had been given the measurements in advance. Ortega said quietly, "That's not luck." "No," Maya said, "it's not." The first simulated threat was a flip target mounted on a pneumatic arm in the left corner of room 1. The arm was padded to prevent sound on release. The target itself was wrapped in synthetic latex to give it a consistent profile. It was designed to deploy without auditory cue, the kind of threat that appeared before a human operator had processing time. Atlas was 4 feet from the target mount when he stopped. Not hesitated. Stopped. Complete stillness in the middle of a forward movement, the way a machine stopped when a sensor tripped. Clean and total, and without the gradual deceleration of a body that had changed its mind. His right front paw came up off the floor and hovered. "Passive alert," Maya said into the comms. Her voice was low and steady. "He's identified a threat profile without contact. The target hasn't deployed," Decker said. "I know. So how does he know it's there?" "Latex off-gas. It's the only synthetic compound in that room. Everything else is concrete, steel, and painted wood. The latex reads as foreign, and it reads as specific. He knows the shape of it before he can see it." The target arm deployed. The flip happened fast, the padded mechanism releasing with enough speed that a human observer watching the feed saw the target and the dog's response as nearly simultaneous. Atlas did not move toward it. He moved around it. A wide lateral arc that cleared 3 sight lines at once, covering angles that a human operator clearing the same room would have needed 2 separate passes to address. He came around the full arc and stopped directly in front of the target. Sat. "Strike ready," Maya said into the comms. "Awaiting verification." Crane leaned toward the monitor. "He's waiting. He identified it, cleared the angles, and now he's waiting." "For what?" Briggs asked. Maya answered without looking away from the feed. "Confirmation. He won't engage a threat until it's confirmed at 100%. Identified is not confirmed. Alert is not authorization." She paused. "He makes the distinction every time." Ortega said, almost to himself, "Most operators don't make that distinction every time." Nobody argued with that. Room 2 was a different problem. The offset door frames created a geometry that required a moving operator to choose between covering the left angle and the right, because the sightlines could not be addressed simultaneously from a single entry position. It was the room that exposed overconfidence most reliably. Most operators committed to one angle and managed the other as a secondary. It was an acceptable approach. It was not a perfect one. Atlas entered room 2 without choosing. He moved through the entry at an angle that split the difference between the 2 sightlines. His body oriented on a diagonal that gave him partial coverage of both simultaneously. And then he rotated in a single smooth pivot that cleared the left angle first and the right angle in the recovery arc without breaking forward momentum. The observation room had gone very quiet. Decker had his arms crossed and his eyes on the feed and his jaw set in the specific way it set when he was thinking hard about something that was rearranging his understanding of a subject he thought he had understood completely. The second flip target deployed from the right side of room 2. Atlas did not go at it. He went around it. The same wide arc, the same methodical angle clearance, the same final position directly in front of the target. Sit. Wait. "He's doing it again," Briggs said. "Same protocol every time," Maya confirmed. "Identify. Clear the angles. Confirm. He does not deviate from that sequence, regardless of target speed or deployment surprise. The sequence is not a training artifact. It's a decision framework he built through operational exposure." "Operational exposure," Decker said. "You mean combat?" "I mean watching what happened when the sequence was skipped," she said. Her voice carried no emotion, and all of it at the same time. He learned the value of every step by being present when the step was missed. Decker did not ask her to elaborate. The room did not need elaboration. Room 3 was where Killhouse 4B made its reputation, and it made it tonight. The lights cut completely. The overhead feed shifted to infrared, green, white, and flat. And on the monitor, Atlas became a moving thermal signature entering a room that was, to every human observer present, functionally dark. He entered low. His head came up once toward the ceiling, which was unusual, which was the first thing that made Decker lean forward from the observation window. "Why is he checking high left?" Decker asked. Maya's eyes were on the feed. She did not answer immediately. Atlas stopped. His posture changed in a way that was different from the threat alerts in the previous rooms. Not the stillness of identification, the stillness of uncertainty, which was its own kind of information, because Atlas did not display uncertainty casually. Then a faint hissing sound came through the feed audio, barely audible, consistent and low, the specific sound of compressed air bleeding from a pressurized line. Crane straightened. "That's the tripwire rig. False intel setup. Compressed air trigger connected to a simulated device." "Yeah," Briggs said slowly. "But nobody told him that." Atlas took one step back. Then he lay down. Complete, flat, deliberate contact with the floor. He did not alert. He did not display a strike-ready posture. He simply removed himself from the threat geometry of the room and stayed there. Maya's voice came through the comms, quieter than before. "Shut down posture. He's identified a false intel environment. He knows the only correct move is to stop and wait for recon confirmation before any engagement decision." The observation room was absolutely silent. Decker stared at the infrared feed. A dog lying flat on the floor of a dark room, having correctly identified a scenario specifically designed to trigger false engagement, having chosen restraint over action, having made the tactically superior decision without a command, without a handler in the room, without anything except the training that had been built into him through years of watching what happened when the wrong choice was made. "He refused to engage," Ortega said. "Yes," Maya said, "because engaging would have been wrong." "Yes." "And he knew that. He always knows that," she said. "That is the thing about Atlas that the two handlers before me could not accept. He is not looking for permission to act. He is looking for confirmation that acting is correct. Those are completely different orientations, and only one of them produces the right outcome every time." Maya walked into room 3. She tapped the side of Atlas's harness once. He rose immediately, shook once, and walked out of the room beside her, at a pace that suggested nothing in particular had just occurred. When they came back through the entry to Kill House 4B, the 11 operators in the observation room had not moved from their positions. They were looking at Maya and Atlas with the collective expression of people who had been taught something they had not expected to need to learn. Decker was the first to speak. He said it quietly, looking at Atlas, who had sat down beside Maya, and returned to the specific quality of stillness he had arrived with on the compound. "Who classified him Tier 1? He said. Maya held his gaze. "He was classified before they shelved him." Decker went still. "Say that again?" "Atlas holds black file clearance," she said. "Solo kill confirmation authorization. He was listed as a recovery asset for a Delta Force operation in the Eastern Theater before the Mazar-e-Sharif incident." She paused. "The program didn't shelve a problem asset. They shelved a Tier 1 operative because one incident was documented incorrectly, and nobody with enough authority wanted to correct the record." The air in the room changed. Crane said, "What happened in Mazar-e-Sharif?" Maya looked at him steadily. "Atlas disobeyed a direct handler command during a breach operation. That is what the official file says." "And what actually happened?" "He disobeyed the command because following it would have walked the entry team into a kill corridor. He deviated from his assigned position, identified and neutralized a threat the human team had not detected, held a flanking route for 11 minutes until extraction was complete, and in the process, exposed a double agent who had been embedded in the operations intelligence chain for 2 years. Nobody spoke. He saved 6 lives, Maya said. He prevented the operation from going loud. He identified a compromise that 2 years of human intelligence work had missed entirely. She paused. And they put him in a kennel and wrote disobedience in his file. Decker sat down on the bench behind him, not because his legs gave out, because sitting was the appropriate physical response to information that required a man to stop and be honest with himself about several things simultaneously. "You came here to fix that record," he said.
"I came here," Maya said, "because the best unit on this compound should know what the best canine asset in this program can do. And because Atlas deserves to be seen by people capable of understanding what they're looking at." She paused. "The record is a separate problem, but yes, that too." Decker looked at Atlas. Atlas looked back at him with those amber eyes, the same temperature they had held on the concrete strip before any of this started. Patient and present, and carrying something inside them that had been earned in a currency that did not have a clean name. Decker thought about the 2 seconds on the concrete, about the lateral movement he had not seen coming from an animal he had assessed as composed but manageable, about the complete absence of aggression in a response that had been completely effective, about a dog lying flat on the floor of a dark room because engaging would have been the wrong decision. He thought about every operator he had ever lost to a wrong decision made under pressure. He thought about what it would mean to have an asset in the field that physically could not make a wrong decision under pressure because wrong decisions had been trained out of it at a level deeper than command and response. He stood up. "Commander Reyes needs to hear this," he said. "Tonight." Maya did not look surprised. She nodded once. "One more thing," Decker said. He looked at her directly. "Why you? Out of everyone left on the qualified handler list, why did you take him?" She was quiet for a moment. She looked at Atlas. He was watching the compound perimeter with a patient attention that never fully switched off. "Because they told me he was too intense," she said. "Too sensory-driven. Too independent. They said he couldn't be repaired." She paused. "I didn't repair him. I just made sure he never felt alone again." Decker held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he looked at his operators, at Briggs, who had crouched in front of Atlas 2 hours ago with the easy confidence of a man who thought he understood what he was dealing with, at Crane, who had listed the compound's canine history with professional authority, at Ortega, who had watched the infrared feed with his jaw slightly open for the last 4 minutes. "Let's go," Decker said. They moved. Commander Reyes had a reputation on the compound for being the kind of man who did not adjust his expression when new information arrived. He received intelligence the way a good surgeon received a complication, without visible reaction and with immediate internal reorganization. It was a quality his operators respected and occasionally found unnerving. He was finding it difficult to maintain tonight. He had been in his office reviewing the evening's evaluation reports when Decker knocked. He had expected a debrief summary. He had gotten Maya Voss, Atlas, and 11 operators who had the collective demeanor of men who had attended a class they had not known they needed. He listened to Decker's summary without interrupting. Then he looked at Maya. Then he looked at Atlas, who was sitting beside Maya's left leg with the same unhurried stillness he had maintained across every context since arriving on the compound. "Black file clearance," Reyes said. "Yes, sir," Maya said. "Solo kill confirmation authorization." "Yes, sir."
And he was shelved because of Mazar-e-Sharif? He was shelved because the incident report omitted the outcomes and documented only the deviation, Maya said. Disobeyed direct handler command. 4 words. That was the entire basis for the classification review. Reyes looked at her steadily. And the actual outcomes. 6 operators who came home. An operation that stayed clean. A double agent identified and extracted from an intelligence chain that had been feeding compromised information for 2 years. She paused. None of that is in the file. Reyes was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of a man who did not believe her. The silence of a man deciding what to do with something he believed completely and found deeply uncomfortable. Who wrote the incident report? He asked. The handler who gave the command Atlas disobeyed, she said. He was also the intelligence liaison for the operation. He was also the 3rd name on the double agent's contact list. The room went still in a way that was different from every stillness that had preceded it. Decker turned his head slowly toward Maya. Say that again. The handler who filed the report documenting Atlas's disobedience was connected to the compromised intelligence chain that Atlas's deviation exposed, she said. He filed the report 6 hours before the double agent extraction was complete, before anyone had fully processed what Atlas had found. She looked at Reyes. The program was shut down 48 hours later. Atlas was transferred to a holding facility. The handler was rotated out of theater on a medical profile that was processed in under 12 hours. A pause. I have spent 14 months reconstructing that timeline. Decker sat down. He did not make a decision to sit down. His body made the decision, and he followed it. He sat on the edge of Reyes's briefing table and looked at the floor, and then looked at Atlas, and then looked at Maya, with the expression of a man rearranging a structure he had thought was stable. You didn't come here just to demonstrate his capability, Decker said. You came here to build a record. I came here, Maya said, because Commander Reyes has the authority to reopen a program classification review. And because the best way to make the case for that review is to put Atlas in front of the most credible operational unit on this installation and let them see what the official file called a liability. Reyes looked at her for a long moment. How old are you? 22, sir. You've been carrying this for 14 months. Yes, sir. Alone. She did not answer immediately. She looked at Atlas. He was looking at Reyes with those amber eyes that had not changed temperature since the beginning of the evening. Not entirely alone, she said. The weight of that was not lost on anyone in the room. Reyes stood. He walked to the window and stood with his back to the room for 5 seconds, which for him was the equivalent of a long deliberation. Then he turned around. I need to make a call, he said. Both of you stay here. He left. The room held 9 operators, 1 handler, and 1 dog. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute. Then Briggs, who had been leaning against the far wall with his arms crossed since they arrived, said what several people were thinking. The handler who wrote the report, he said. What happened to him? Maya looked at him directly. He was honorably discharged 14 months ago. He is currently employed by a private defense contractor with a federal consulting contract. She paused. The same contractor that was awarded the intelligence support contract for the theater where Atlas's program operated. Crane said, very quietly. He landed on his feet. So far, Maya said. The door opened and Reyes came back. He moved differently than he had moved when he left. The same controlled exterior, but underneath it a velocity that had not been present before. I spoke with the program director, he said. The original program director. The one who stood the unit up in Djibouti 4 years ago. He looked at Maya. He's been waiting for someone to make this call for 14 months, he said, and I am quoting him directly. that he has the unredacted after-action report from Mazar-e-Sharif in a personal file that he was told to destroy and did not destroy. A pause. He kept it because he knew the day would come when someone who could do something with it would ask. Maya did not move. She did not change expression. But something in her posture shifted by a single degree, in the way that a person's posture shifted when they had been holding a weight for a very long time, and someone had just put their hand under it. "He kept it," she said. "He kept it," Reyes confirmed. Decker looked at Atlas. Atlas was looking at Maya, watching her face with a specific quality of attention that was not a working scan, but something more personal. The attention of an animal monitoring the emotional state of the person it was partnered with. "What happens now?" Ortega asked from the back of the room. Reyes looked at him. "Now we do this correctly." He turned to Maya. "I'm initiating a formal capability review request tonight. That puts Atlas's file into an official evaluation process that cannot be administratively closed without a full board review. It also triggers a mandatory disclosure requirement on any incident reports connected to the original program." He paused. "Including the one from Mazar-e-Sharif." The operators absorbed that. Briggs said, "The handler who wrote the report. When the disclosure requirement hits." "He'll know," Maya said. "Yes. And the contractor connection will be part of the formal record." She met Briggs's eyes. "That's the point." Decker stood up from the table. He walked across the room to where Maya was standing, stopped 2 feet from her, and looked at her with a direct assessment of a man who had spent his career evaluating people in high-stakes contexts and had developed an accurate instrument for it. "You walked onto this compound today with no rank visible, no brief, no unit attachment, and a dog with a classified file, and you maneuvered this entire situation from the range to this office in approximately 4 hours," he said. "That is either the most disciplined long-game operational play I have seen in 20 years, or you are the most naturally capable young officer I have encountered in the same period." He paused. "I'm not sure it's not both." Maya held his gaze. "I had a good teacher," she said. "Who?" She looked at Atlas. Nobody laughed. It was not the kind of moment that produced laughter. It was the kind of moment that produced the quiet recognition of something true being said in the simplest possible way. Reyes said, "I need statements from every operator who observed the Kill House demonstration. Formal, signed, dated, tonight. I want the capability record built from eyewitness documentation before the classification review request goes in." He looked at Decker. "Can you have that by 2200? "I can have it by 2130, Decker said. "Good." Reyes turned to Maya. "You're staying on compound tonight. I'll have quarters arranged. Atlas, too." He paused. "I am also assigning you a formal temporary observer credential, which I should have done when you arrived, and which someone on my staff will answer for tomorrow morning." "That's not necessary, sir." "It is necessary," Reyes said, "because the next 12 hours are going to move fast, and I want your position here to be documented and clean before they do." Maya nodded. The operators filed out to write their statements. The room cleared to Reyes, Maya, and Atlas. Reyes looked at the dog one more time. Atlas looked back at him with those amber eyes. "The original program director said something else," Reyes said. "When I told him it was a 22-year-old handler who had reconstructed the timeline and was standing in my office tonight." He paused. "He said Shepard would have approved of her." Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Shepard taught me," she said. Her voice was steady, and something underneath it was not. "Not directly. Through Atlas. Through the way Atlas responds to certain commands, certain pressure patterns, certain situations. The way he was trained is the way Shepard built him. Every session I have run with Atlas for 18 months has been a conversation with a man I never met." She looked at Atlas. He's still in there. In the way Atlas works. In the decisions he makes. In the way he waits for confirmation before he acts, because Shepard taught him that patience was the most dangerous weapon a good operator carried. Reyes did not respond immediately. When he spoke, his voice had the specific quality of a man choosing words carefully because the moment required it. "Then let's make sure what Shepard built doesn't stay buried in a file that someone with something to hide wrote in 6 hours on a bad day in Mazar-e-Sharif," he said. "Let's make sure it goes back to work where it belongs." Maya looked at him. Then she looked at Atlas. Atlas was already looking at the door. The statements were done by 2115. 11 operators, 11 signatures, 11 accounts of what they had witnessed in Kill House 4B, written in the direct, factual language of men who understood that the value of a record was in its precision. Decker reviewed each one before it went to Reyes. He did not ask anyone to change what they wrote. He did not need to. Every statement said the same thing, in different words, which was the most credible kind of evidence there was. Reyes submitted the formal capability review request at 2143. By 2200, the original program director, whose name was retired Captain Frank Okafor, had transmitted the unredacted after-action report from Mazar-e-Sharif to a secure Naval Special Warfare Command document server. He had been keeping it in a personal encrypted file for 14 months. When the transmission confirmed, he called Reyes directly. Maya was in the room when the call came in. Reyes put it on speaker without asking her permission, which was its own kind of statement. "Captain Okafor," Reyes said. "Commander." The voice on the line was older and carried the specific weight of a man who had been waiting a long time for a particular conversation. "Is she there?" "She is," Reyes said. A pause. "Lieutenant Voss." "Sir," Maya said. "I want you to know something," Okafor said. "I built that program for 4 years. I fought for the budget, the classification level, the integration protocol, every piece of it. When they shut it down, I filed 3 separate review requests through official channels. All 3 were administratively closed within 30 days. His voice did not waver, but it had texture in it. "I kept the report because I knew the program was right and the shutdown was wrong, and I was not willing to be the last person who knew both of those things." A pause. "I kept it for Atlas, and for Shepard, and for anyone who cared enough to come looking." Maya did not speak immediately. When she did, her voice was steady in the way that required effort to maintain. "Thank you for keeping it, sir." "Don't thank me," Okafor said. "I kept a file. You rebuilt the case from scratch at 22 years old, while running a full handler protocol with the most demanding canine asset the program ever produced. The gratitude moves in one direction, and it is not toward me." The call ended. Reyes looked at Maya. She was looking at Atlas. Atlas was looking at the door, with the patient forward attention of a dog who understood that the work was not finished yet. "It's going to move fast now," Reyes said. "The disclosure requirement triggered by the review request will flag every connected file, including the incident report, including the handler's current contractor clearance." He paused. "He'll have legal counsel involved within 48 hours. "I know," Maya said. "Are you prepared for that?" She looked at him directly. "I have been prepared for that for 14 months, sir." Reyes studied her face for a moment, with the expression of a man revising an assessment he had formed earlier in the evening, and finding the revision significant. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow starts early." She nodded and left with Atlas. Decker was waiting in the corridor outside. He had not gone to the barracks. He had not gone anywhere. He was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and his jaw carrying the same set it had held since the kill house, which was the set of a man working through something that had more layers than it had appeared to from the outside. He looked at Atlas when Maya came through the door. Atlas looked back at him.
"How long have you known about the contractor connection?" Decker asked.
8 months, Maya said. And you came here instead of going directly to JAG. JAG requires documented evidence of a current violation. What I had was a reconstructed timeline and an unredacted report that was being held by a retired officer outside official channels. She met his eyes. What I needed was a formal capability review request, initiated by a commander with the authority and the credibility to make the disclosure requirement stick. That requires a current operational commander who has personally witnessed Atlas's capability and is willing to put his name on the request. She paused. You just did that. All 11 of your operators just did that. Commander Reyes just did that. Decker was quiet for a moment. You used us, he said. I gave you accurate information and let you make your own decisions, she said. That is not the same thing. He looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then something moved across his face that was not quite a smile, and was not quite respect, and was, in fact, the specific expression of a man encountering a quality he recognized and had not expected to find in this particular form. No, he said, it's not the same thing. He pushed off the wall and looked at Atlas one more time. Atlas was sitting beside Maya's leg, with those amber eyes holding the corridor with the same patient attention they had held the South Range 7 hours ago, when this entire night began. Decker reached into his jacket pocket. He took out a folded piece of paper and held it toward Maya. She looked at it. Then she took it. It was a personal statement, handwritten on compound letterhead. At the top, in Decker's block printing, were the words, "For the record." Below that, a single dense paragraph that described not Atlas's performance in Kill House 4B, but Decker's 2 seconds on the concrete, written in the plain first-person language of a man documenting his own underestimation of something, and what it had cost him, and what he had understood because of it. At the bottom, a line that Maya read twice. This animal represents a standard of operational discipline and decision integrity that this command should aspire to match. His record should reflect what he is, not what was convenient to write about him on a day when the truth was inconvenient for someone with something to hide. Maya looked up from the paper. Decker said, "That's not for the formal review file. That's for you. In case you ever need to remember why you spent 14 months on this." He paused. "Which I don't think you will. But keep it anyway." She folded the paper carefully. She put it inside her jacket. "Thank you, Senior Chief," she said. "Decker," he said. "Just Decker." He walked down the corridor and did not look back, which was its own kind of statement. The formal review board convened 11 days later. It was not a quiet proceeding. By the time the board sat, the disclosure requirement had flagged 47 connected documents across 3 separate filing systems, including the original program's full operational record, the handler's complete service jacket, and 6 contractor clearance applications that had been processed through a review office, where the same compromised intelligence liaison had worked as a consultant for 4 months post-discharge. The board reviewed the unredacted Mazari Sharif report. They reviewed the security camera footage from the Molly compound that showed Atlas completing his handler's mission without command, without escalation, and without error. They reviewed 11 signed operator statements from Decker's platoon. They reviewed Captain Okafor's 14 months of preserved documentation. The handler who had written the original incident report was contacted by his legal counsel and did not respond to the board's disclosure request within the required window. That non-response was its own kind of answer. On the morning of the board's final session, Maya sat outside the chamber with Atlas and waited. She had not slept well for 11 days. She had eaten enough to function and had run her sessions with Atlas every morning at 05:30 because consistency was what she had when everything else felt uncertain. And Atlas needed her to be consistent more than she needed to manage her own anxiety. He had stayed close to her for 11 days in the specific way he stayed close when his read of her chemistry told him she was carrying something heavy. Not intrusive, not demanding, just present at a distance that said, "I am here, and I am paying attention, and you do not have to hold this by yourself." Decker came out of the chamber at 10:47. He looked at her, and his face said everything before his mouth opened. "It's done," he said. Maya did not speak. Full reinstatement of the program classification. Atlas's file corrected to reflect the accurate outcomes of Mazar-e-Sharif. The incident report flagged as a compromised document and removed from the operational record. He paused. The contractor clearances are being referred to the Inspector General's office. That process is separate and will take longer, but it has been initiated through a channel that cannot be administratively closed. Maya looked at Atlas. He was looking at her. His amber eyes were steady and warm, and carrying inside them everything they had always carried. 8 handlers, 4 combat theaters, 14 months of a kennel, and 1 young officer who had decided that the truth about what he was mattered enough to spend every professional resource she had proving it. "Atlas," she said. His ears came forward. "It's done." He stood up. He pressed his head against her chest and held it there. She put both arms around his neck and held on, and did not perform anything about it, because there was no performance left in her, and nothing in that corridor required one. Decker stood 3 feet away and looked at the wall and gave them the moment. Reyes met them in the courtyard an hour later. He was carrying a single envelope. He extended it to Maya. "Orders," she said. "Yes," he said. "Effective immediately. You and Atlas are reactivated under the program's formal operational structure, which Captain Okafor has agreed to advise on a consulting basis." He paused. "Your first deployment brief is in 72 hours. The operation is classified at a level I am not going to describe in a courtyard. What I will tell you is that it is the kind of situation the program was originally designed for, and it has been waiting for the right asset." Maya looked at the envelope. She did not open it. "Sir," she said, "one question."
Go ahead.
"The theater." Reyes looked at her steadily. "Eastern." She absorbed that. Eastern Theater. The same geographic command structure where Atlas had worked with Shepard, where the double agent had operated, where Mazar-e-Sharif had happened, where the truth had been buried in a 4-word incident report and a kennel and 14 months of silence. She looked at Atlas. He was already looking at the deployment building on the far side of the courtyard. His posture had changed in the specific way it changed when direction had been given, and he was ready to move. Head up, weight forward, tail level. The complete physical language of a working dog who had been waiting to return to the work he was built for, and had finally been pointed at it. "Ready?" she asked him. He stepped forward without hesitation. On the transport ramp before dawn, Decker came to see them off. He did not bring the platoon. He came alone, the way men came to moments they wanted to witness without turning into an occasion. He stood at the base of the ramp and looked at Maya and Atlas at the top of it. "Shepard's going to know," he said. He said it the way people said things they believed but could not verify, with the specific, quiet confidence of a faith that had been earned rather than inherited. Maya looked at him. Then she looked at Atlas. Atlas was already facing the interior of the aircraft. Patient. still, pointing toward the next mission with the absolute certainty of an animal who had never doubted its purpose, even when every human system around it had failed to recognize it. She thought about 8 handlers, about the voices Atlas carried in whatever place inside him those voices lived, about Shepard in a breach corridor in Mali, making the last decision he ever made, and the dog that had finished the mission for him and been punished for it, and had waited in a kennel for someone to come and tell the right story. She thought about 14 months of reconstructed timelines and preserved documents, and a retired captain who had kept a file because he refused to be the last person who knew the truth. She thought about Decker, flat on the concrete, and the amber eyes that had not changed temperature, and the 2 words she had said before it happened. "I warned you." She had not said it as a threat. She had said it because Atlas deserved to be in a room full of the most capable people on the installation, and she wanted those people to know what they were looking at before they made the mistake of deciding they already did. They knew now. She turned and walked up the ramp. Atlas moved beside her at shoulder level, 1 pace forward, ears reading the dark ahead of them, amber eyes steady and certain, and lit from inside by something that had no military classification and no official designation, but was the most powerful operational asset either of them had ever carried. The ramp rose behind them. The engine turned, and in the corrected file that would follow them into the Eastern Theater, under the line that had once read, "Disobey Direct Handler Command," there were now 47 documented operational outcomes, a full board reinstatement, and a single notation added by Captain Frank Okafor at the bottom of the record. It read, "This animal did not disobey. He saw what no one else could see, did what no one else could do, and waited 14 months for the world to catch up to what he already knew." Some truths take longer to arrive than they should, but they arrive. And when they do, they arrive with amber eyes, and a patience that does not break, and a record that no one will bury again. Atlas was home, and this time, he was never going back to the kennel. If this story reached you today, share it with someone who needs to hear that the truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds its way back to the surface. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this traveled. And if you believe that real loyalty is the kind that stays even when the world gets it wrong, write Amen. Because somewhere tonight, there is an Atlas waiting for someone with enough courage to come and tell the right story. And somewhere, there is a Maya who will.